Welcome back to Off the Cuff Reviews. My name's Alex, and today I have a really special video for you. I'm going to be talking about horror movie scores. So let's get into it. Now, this video is going to be more of like a dive into scores and composers and soundtracks within horror movies and less about my personal favorites. I liked to like kind of dive into and talk about this because, you know, my channel, I talk about movies and that's what I started my channel on, but I also talk about music and I wanted to marry the two, especially because I have some ideas of maybe creating some scores myself in the future. And so I wanted to do some research and actually dive in and maybe make a video because this is something like I'm really passionate about and I just want to talk about on this channel. I thought it would be cool to make a really like a deep dive. I thought it'd be cool to make a deep dive video into this. So yeah, if you guys are into that, stick around because we're getting into that kind of topic today. So music and sound is essential to movie making, especially in the horror movie space. And I mean the music, the sounds and everything are there to build tension, build fear. That is what it is there to do. And I mean, there have been times where the score for a horror movie is used in place of sound effects to make you scared. It's a vital thing that has been used since movies have been invented, starting with even the silent film era. Even silent films, when projected for an audience, used a live musical section to compensate for no audio in the movie. Now, I mean, I think they started with just strictly silent films, but they kind of noticed that it was cooler if they just like added some music, and a lot of these times they were actually using live orchestras. Now, according to Wikipedia, Paramount Pictures claims they invented the idea of scoring movies with music in the 30s, and that's not really true when you look into the silent film era from the 1800s, where, like I said, the filmmakers hired live musicians to play music throughout the movie. But of course, a huge conglomerate corporation is taking the credit for inventing music or something when they clearly didn't. And there's no way they just invented this idea when it was happening like way before they like existed. Now, switching gears, some of the first horror movies to have iconic scores and soundtracks are movies like Nosferatu and Frankenstein. And with the new Nosferatu dropping, and actually it's already out because this video was supposed to be out weeks ago and I just never filmed it. It was supposed to be, I thought it would be interesting to compare. And I wanted to actually like dive into a comparison of the old Nosferatu score and this Nosferatu score, but I never really got a chance to do that for this video, but I'm thinking about doing that for a separate video. Let me know down in the comments if you would be interested in something like that. There's been a huge evolution of horror scores over the years. It started with orchestral elements. Like I said, they hired live musicians to evoke the feelings of terror and dread, and it was so effective. I mean, even today we have scores like that, orchestral and theatrical approaches. Also, they really like draw emotions from the sounds. Innovation came with Hitchcock's Psycho. Bernard Herrmann used a strings-only approach with screeching violins that really captured that terrorizing feeling, and it really is like haunting to this day. Also around this time, the use of theremins were added for science fiction and sci-fi horror to grab that spooky atmosphere with weird sounds that you don't typically hear. These small changes were actually huge innovations in the world of horror scores. They changed the game from then on, even now. These same techniques are used to capture the same feelings, but those initial movies came out almost 70 years ago now. Rosemary's Baby also had a unique score. They took lullabies and turned them into sinister tones for the movie. And these tones were used to grab onto psychological tension that was needed for this type of story. And this type of story is really like psychological. And a lot of these movies are like, these movies that I'm mentioning are more psychological. And I feel like these sounds like really were needed to capture that emotion, to capture the tone and the tension that they wanted to build, and to have you as the audience enthralled and invested in the movie. I feel like with these techniques, they were innovating at every single turn. I mean, when Psycho came out, that is one of the most beloved horror movies of all time. Alfred Hitchcock is one of the best innovators of our generation, of our time for film. And he made Psycho, and with those screeching sounds, like those sounds that they used for the score, those were also taken for elements in other horror movies and kind of like added upon. And then it came my favorite era, the 70s. John Carpenter exploded onto the scene in the 70s. He had what was considered a minimalist score for Halloween, and it is iconic. It is noticeable. This is one that gets stuck in your head. You can recite it to me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And quite frankly, it's capturing audiences to this day. It's one of the most important scores for any horror movie at all, ever, in my opinion. Also added a lot of synth elements, and this was a huge leap forward for horror. And this is what sets icons apart from other people. People who are innovators, people who are innovating and taking steps forward. So you had in the 60s, you had Psycho, like I mentioned, with those screeching violins that, even they kind of took that with Jaws and Friday the 13th. But you know what else they did? After that, they went into more synth elements, and it just really the droning sounds that they added for Halloween, and it was more minimalist and drawn back, but still hit you in the chest. That is what was needed for this era. That is why this era was so important, and that is why these filmmakers are so important. They are innovators. They are constantly thinking of how to move the thing forward and not just copying others, not just trying to be complacent and remaking the same thing over and over again. They are doing something new. They are pushing the genre forward. And like I said, I'm going to keep harping on it. Sound and music is the most important thing for any movie. Movies don't exist without sound. Now, I know that there's silent film eras. I know that there was silent films, but even those people added music to. They wanted to have something to capture that emotion that they needed for the audience to latch onto. And that is why this stuff is so important. Another amazing 70s sound that was really progressive was this iconic group named Goblin. You might know them from scores that they did for Italian horror like Suspiria. They worked a lot with Dario Argento. This is a group that was from Italy, but at the same time as you had Carpenter in America progressing forward with the synth elements in Italy. That's what they were doing. But on top of that, they were pushing it forward even more. They were already innovating whatever American filmmakers were doing with the synth scores. They were doing that and then taking another step forward by adding progressive elements like rock sounds, like guitars and shit. That's what they were doing, and they were really pushing the genre forward. People still, to this day, they still go on tour, and people still to this day will go see them. Goblin to this day still, there's screenings of the movies that they did scores for, and they will go and they will play it live on stage as the screening for the movie is happening. That's the type of shit, and they have such a loyal cult fan base. This is one of the best groups to ever come out for horror scoring and composing out there. They push the genre forward. This is the one that you need to pay attention to. This is the one that you need to learn from, okay? Once Carpenter became popular for these synth-heavy scores, that type of music grew and expanded throughout the 80s and the 90s. Movies like A Nightmare on Elm Street and The Thing really pushed this forward as well. And in the 2000s, they started bringing back signature orchestral sounds within this genre. And for movies like Midsommar and Hereditary and It Follows. But then another shift happened. Now, this other shift that happened has always kind of been a thing, but was really popularized in this era. But the shift was when they turned their scores into more of a sound design. I had already mentioned this in this video, that sounds and orchestral elements and scores, they started using them in the horror genre instead of sound effects to capture tension and build tension for the audience. Movies like The Witch and A Quiet Place use this to their full advantage. The filmmakers used orchestral elements that would normally go into a score and used them for sound design to make it even scarier. This era has heavily inspired long, unsettling drones and silences and changes of frequencies in the sounds to cause uneasiness and discomfort. Now, let's get into how they're made. These scores are made in collaboration with the composers and the directors to really capture the tone and mood of the piece. They use all of the techniques I mentioned to build tension with crescendos and dissonance. And they also rely heavily on repetitive motifs that stick in your head and make you associate that with certain movies, like Jaws or Halloween. Really iconic sounds that just get burned into your brain. They also use this for diegetic and non-diegetic sounds. Diegetic sounds are sounds that exist in the world of a film. So sounds that a character is doing, and then non-diegetic is the opposite. So it is the sounds that the audience hears that the characters on the movies don't. And the filmmakers use these techniques to compose their scores. Now let's get into why they actually matter. These scores matter because they evoke a primal fear and build tension. They manipulate your emotions while you're watching the film. They are integral parts of the movie, and it's noticeable when movies lack a score. I like to think of scores as a whole extra character of a movie. Now, before we wrap this up, I wanted to just give a list of horror score composers and some of the movies that they worked on. Scores are integral to the idea of a movie, especially horror. These sounds control your emotions and act as a whole extra character in a movie. They really capture the tone and the mood of a movie that the filmmakers wanted to portray. There are a bunch of different types and different music elements and techniques used that work in different ways to bring a film to completion. Some films lack a score purposely, but it's definitely noticeable. They are a huge part of the filmmaking process, and a great score can make or break a movie. Now, I wanted to ask, do you have a favorite horror score? Let me know down in the comments. I would love to chat about this further and open a dialogue and have this community. That's what I love about this channel. That's why I wanted to do this video. I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts, and I want to know if you guys learned anything about this. Maybe this wasn't as deep dive as it could be, but I just wanted to talk about horror scores because they're some of my favorite things, and I feel like they're really important to movies, especially horror. And I feel like horror in general is just one of my favorite genres to watch. So I wanted to just talk about that and learn more. I wanted to learn about these things and learn about the filmmakers and people who worked on these movies and stuff like that. And that's why I initially started out to make this video. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought down below. Let me know what your favorite horror score is, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks for watching.
They call me a god.